Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Finding Evidence, New Resources for Education Researchers from the What Works Clearinghouse. Before we get started, I will briefly go through some housekeeping items. You can make the slides larger by clicking on the bottom right corner of the slides window and dragging. If you have accessed the audio through the teleconference line, you may experience a slight delay. If possible, we encourage you to listen to the webinar through your computer. We encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A tool at the webinar page. You can ask a question when it comes to mind, and you do not have to wait until the Q&A period. Because we're recording this, members of the audience are in listen-only mode. This means that the only way to ask questions is through the Q&A tool, so please use it. We have scheduled an hour for this webcast. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. However, you can also submit technical questions through the Q&A widget. Please note, most technical issues can be resolved by pressing F5 or Command+R on Macs to refresh the player console. The slide deck, the recording, and transcript of the webcast will be available on the What Works Clearinghouse website for download. So with that, I'd like to introduce Chris Weiss, Senior Education Research Scientist at the Institute of Education Sciences. Chris, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, I'm Chris Weiss. I'm the team lead for the What Works Clearinghouse at the U.S. Department of Education Institute of Education Sciences. On behalf of my colleagues at the Clearinghouse, I wanted to extend my welcome to you. We're excited to have the opportunity to show you some of the new features of the WWC's website and how we've made our resources and data easier to access. We're always eager to hear from you and to answer any questions you might have, whether during this webinar or afterwards. And now, it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Elias Walsh.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I am Elias Walsh, Senior Researcher at Mathematica Policy Research and Deputy Project Director of the What Works Clearinghouse at Mathematica. Along with my colleague, Jesse Mazika, we are going to be talking to you today about how the WWC supports education researchers and how to find evidence about what works using WWC resources. We will present for about 40 minutes and then have some time to answer your questions. And just another reminder, you can submit your questions using the Q&A tool at any time. You don't have to wait until the Q&A session at the end. Over the past few years, there's been a push for education decision makers to make instructional or curricular choices using evidence from scientifically based research. But identifying evidence-based programs and practices can often be time-consuming and difficult. Searching for studies about an intervention can return dozens or hundreds of results. Even if educators did have time to find and read all of the relevant research, it can often be difficult to identify the high-quality studies that can be believed. Researchers also want to know and understand the evidence for interventions, and they have limited time and resources as well. The WWC was established in 2002 to be a central and trusted source of evidence for what works in education. The Clearinghouse was one of the first investments of the Institute of Education Sciences, which is an independent, nonpartisan entity within the U.S. Department of Education. The Clearinghouse aims to identify all relevant, rigorous research on a topic, review those studies against design standards, and summarize the findings from high-quality research. The WWC's goal is to provide its users, including busy educators and researchers, with easy access to summaries of evidence based on the most rigorous research and support efficient, evidence-based decisions. The Clearinghouse does not directly test or study interventions. We establish standards for high-quality evidence, review studies against those standards, and synthesize and disseminate information on what works in education. In this webinar, we will talk about how the WWC supports education researchers by providing free resources and access to the results of WWC reviews, including summaries of the evidence on interventions and downloadable study-level data sets, as well as technical documents describing the evidence standards and supporting researchers in conducting rigorous evaluations. We will demonstrate when and how you might use these resources through a series of case studies. The first is focused on how to find what works on the WWC website. Next, we'll talk about how to drill down to access evidence from individual studies on what works. Finally, we'll talk about free resources from the WWC that support researchers in designing and implementing studies that will meet WWC standards. This webinar will not discuss Department of Education guidance or how to use the WWC to follow the guidance about evidence tiers. I will now turn it over to Jesse to begin with the first case study.
Thanks, Elias. Elias mentioned that we will use case studies to walk through key features of the WWC website. Our first case study is, how can I find a program that helps 4th and 5th graders with reading comprehension? A researcher might be interested to know what research the WWC has reviewed in this area before they start a new project. We will go through the case study with a live demonstration of the WWC website. As we turn to the website, I want to note that there may be a lag since we are streaming this live through the webinar platform. You won't see this delay when you use the website. When you first go to the WWC's website, you'll find a chalkboard at the top with a variety of topics. This is Find What Works. In addition, you can navigate to different parts of the site using the menu button in the middle of the header. All resources related to finding evidence can be found under Find Evidence. To find an intervention to help 4th and 5th graders with reading comprehension, we will use Find What Works, an advanced search function that allows you to look at the evidence of the effectiveness of interventions reviewed by the WWC. Selecting one of the topics from the Blackboard will take you to Find What Works. If we want to find a reading curriculum, we can start by selecting literacy from the Blackboard. Let's quickly view the page of results. Most of the page consists of a list of interventions with research reviewed by the WWC that had evidence of effectiveness for literacy outcomes. At the top of the column, you can see that there are 70 interventions listed, and just below that, a small filter tag to indicate that the results you see are for literacy. Each row in the table represents one intervention and lists the grades that were included in the research for that intervention. At the beginning of each row is a symbol, in this case the symbol for literacy, a book. This symbol will be colored and have a box around it if there are positive or potentially positive findings in that area. As we scroll down the page, you can see that there are dozens and dozens of interventions with positive or potentially positive findings. Otherwise, the symbol will be gray, which indicates other evidence, including mixed effects, negative effects, or no discernible effects. By default, the results are sorted by the first column, the evidence of effectiveness, so the interventions with the gray box will be at the bottom of the list. Scrolling back up, those interventions with evidence covering more outcomes or based on more research are at the top of the list. However, remember that all interventions with the colored symbol have positive or potentially positive effects. You can click on the other column headings to sort the data by that column instead. To the left of the results is a column that contains the same topics as the Blackboard on the home page. Here you can see that literacy is selected. It has a colored box and a check mark. There are boxes next to the other topics that you can also select. For example, if you are interested in literacy for children and youth with disabilities, you can also select the box next to that topic. A few of the topics are grayed out and have no checkbox next to them. They can't be selected because there are no interventions that cover both literacy and these outcomes that have been reviewed by the WWC. At the bottom of the chalkboard is a button to bring up a menu of more filters. Clicking on this allows you to apply additional filters to the search, such as grade, delivery method, or specific outcomes of interest. When you make selections through this option, the filters exclude results that don't match your criteria. Let's select grades 4 and 5. And comprehension from the outcomes list for literacy. You can see that there are 17 interventions with this criteria. After clicking OK and going back to the results, you can see a shorter list and additional filter tags above the table showing what the results are now filtered by. The grades column will always show all of the grades examined in the research reviewed by the WWC for this intervention, but the grades you selected are incorporated in that grade range. You can also select some of these interventions by clicking the checkbox in the Compare column and clicking Compare Selected. We'll select Peer-Assisted Learning Strategies, Cooperative Integrated Reading Composition, and Accelerated Reader. After you click Compare Selected, a printable pop-up window will appear with some additional information about the intervention, such as the effectiveness of all outcomes examined in the study. We're interested in reading comprehension and see that all 3 interventions have potentially positive effects. So that's a brief introduction to Find What Works and how to use it to find programs to help 4th and 5th graders with reading comprehension. Now we will move on to our second case study, How Can I Find Evidence on a Specific Intervention? We'll also do a live demonstration of the website to walk through this case study. Going back to the site, from the menu bar in the middle of the header, you can go to Search Publications Intervention Reports. This will take you to the Publication search. From the Publication search, you can select a topic from the drop-down to see all intervention reports for that topic, or search for a specific intervention by typing keywords into the Search WWC Publications text box. Let's look up Read 180 by typing it into the search box. From the results, you can see there are 2 listed, one for Read 180 reviewed under the Adolescent Literacy Protocol in November 2016, and the other for Read 180 reviewed under the Students with Learning Disabilities Protocol in July 2010. Let's click on the first result from November 2016. From the publication search, you will go to the evidence snapshot that shows some key information from this intervention report, including a summary of the overall findings, the number of studies that met standards out of the studies that were eligible for review, all of the domains in the review, and some key demographic information for the studies that met standards included in the review that reported sample information. The bottom of the page has related resources, including a link to the summary page for the intervention, the review protocol, and related interventions in Find What Works. Going back to the top of the evidence snapshot, you can download the intervention report from the upper right corner. The intervention report contains additional information about the program, such as program details and cost, as well as a research summary, detailed study information for the studies included in this review. Let's back out of the intervention report and go back to the evidence snapshot. From here, we can go to the intervention page that lists all research reviewed by the WWC on this intervention. You can get to the intervention page by clicking the word intervention towards the top, or by going to the WWC Summary of Evidence for Read 180 under Related Resources at the bottom of the page. This is the intervention page. You can also get here if you click on an intervention name directly from the list of results and Find What Works. This Summary of Evidence page includes information on all of the research on Read 180 reviewed by the WWC. At the top of the page, there's a high-level description of the intervention. Then there are tabs under Reviewed Research for all the systematic reviews conducted by the WWC. For Read 180, there are 2 tabs, one for adolescent literacy and one for students with learning disabilities. Let's take a look at the information in the table for the adolescent literacy review. The first column lists the outcome domains included in the research for this intervention. Outcome domains are used to group together a set of related outcomes. The next column includes the effectiveness rating, which is a summary of the effectiveness of the intervention based on the quality of research, the statistical significance of findings, the magnitude of findings, and the consistency of findings across studies. If you put your cursor over the effectiveness rating symbol, hover text will appear describing what the rating is. Next is a count of studies meeting standards reviewed by the WWC in the systematic review for this domain. There's also listed the grades examined in the studies that met WWC design standards in this review, which may not reflect the full range of grades for which the intervention may be used. The number of students included in the research is also displayed. The last column is the improvement index. The improvement index is the expected change in percentile rank for an average comparison group student if the student had received the intervention. So an improvement index of 4 means that for the average comparison group student, receiving Read 180 would move her from the 50th percentile to the 54th percentile. The improvement index is only shown here if the effectiveness rating is positive, potentially positive, or negative. Dashes are displayed for mixed or no discernible effects. Above the table column headers, the tab also includes links to the evidence snapshot where we just came from, the intervention report PDF, and the review protocol used to review the studies in this systematic review. Now we will dig a little deeper into a particular study with our third case study, How Can I Learn About the Studies That Contribute to the WWC's Effectiveness Rating for Read 180? From the WWC Summary of Evidence, you can click on the domain row, such as comprehension, to expand it and see the list of citations for the studies meeting standards with findings in this domain. If you click on a citation, you will go to the study page with more detailed information about the particular study. Let's click on the Misch 2011 study. You will know you're on the study page by the title on the page, WWC Review of the Study. The top of the page includes the citation. Right below that is the study design, sample size included in the study, and the grades of the students in the study. Next, if the study has been reviewed more than once by the WWC, there will be a Select a WWC Review drop-down showing all WWC reviews in this study. For the WWC review selected, there is a table listing the review details, findings, sample characteristics, and study details for studies meeting standards. The review details includes the study rating in a blue box on the right-hand side to show whether the study meets WWC standards with or without reservations. There is also a blue box to show if the study has at least one statistically significant positive finding. The review details also links to the intervention report PDF and review protocol. If the study meets standards, there will be a Findings tab. The Findings tab includes all the findings for the study included in the WWC's review that meet standards. Click the More Outcomes to expand the table to see all outcomes in each of the domains. The Sample Characteristics tab provides a quick visual snapshot of key study and sample characteristics reported by the study author. The Study Details tab includes narrative text with additional detail about the study, including the setting, study sample, and what the intervention and comparison groups received. That wraps up our third case study. Back to you, Elias.
Thanks, Jesse. Now we are going to move on to our fourth case study, which is how can I find and download information on a specific research study about Read 180. A researcher might be interested to know how the WWC rated a specific study, and if the researcher plans to use it in their work. For example, a researcher may want to cite the study as evidence of program effectiveness in a journal article, or use it to inform work with educators or decision makers. For this case study, we'll imagine that we are looking for a study conducted by White and co-authors in 2005, and maybe that's all we know about the study citation. The WWC has a database of individual study reviews that you can access through the website using the Find Evidence menu, which is accessible by hovering over the website's header. There are options here to go to Find What Works, browse WWC practice guides, and look at reviews or data from individual studies. We're looking for a WWC review of an individual study. This option takes you to a search page where you can enter in what you know about the study you are looking for. The top row has pull-down menus that filter your search. You can limit to studies that have a certain rating, use certain designs, or in certain WWC topic areas. You can even find studies that do not meet WWC standards and those that were determined to be ineligible for review during a screening process. You can also select to see only studies with at least one statistically significant positive effect. In the text box below, you can enter anything you know about the citation. We know the author and the year, so we'll type in White 2005. A list of related citations appears, and the study we are looking for about Read 180 is the third in the list. Clicking on the citation brings up its WWC study page, where you can learn about the findings, sample, and context, as Jesse showed you with another study. Now, you might want to save the information about the WWC's review of this study for later use, perhaps in a meta-analysis you are conducting. You can use the results from WWC reviews to build a data set for your analysis. Rather than copying and pasting the information, you can export the review data for the study to a data file. To do this, you can use the export link at the top right-hand corner of the study page. Click OK in the dialog box that appears to download the data. You'll receive a zip archive with Excel files. These include study-level information such as the design and WWC rating. You'll also receive data on each finding within the study, such as the outcome measure and effect size. And you'll receive a data dictionary to help you understand the information available on each study. Now, instead of downloading data sets from multiple individual studies, you might want to just obtain data from all WWC reviews to use when conducting your own analyses. So our next case study asks, how can I find and download all WWC study data? You can use the WWC website to download information for all studies that meet WWC design standards with or without reservations. Again, from the Evidence menu, select the last option, which is Data from Individual Studies. This brings you to the page from which you can download the information with a single click. The information is available as a set of Excel files and includes a data dictionary to help you understand the information. There are separate data files for intervention reports, studies, and findings. The separate files include unique identifiers that allow you to link an intervention report to the studies on that intervention, and then link each study back to its findings for each outcome and sample analyzed. Using these files, you can sort, filter, and manipulate the data sets however you'd like to see all the findings for a given outcome domain, topic, grade level, or intervention. The WWC also provides resources for researchers to understand the WWC standards, supporting the design of studies that can meet standards. Our last case study asks, how can I learn about how to design and implement a study that will meet WWC design standards? The WWC has several resources to help you understand how we review studies and how you should report findings in your studies so that we have what we need to review your study. I'll talk about each of these resources in detail and show you where to find them on the WWC website. When designing a study, you will want to understand the process and standards that the WWC uses to assess the rigor of the evidence for effects of interventions on educationally relevant outcomes. The WWC developed a set of standards based on methodological research about what types of study designs generate causally valid estimates of the effectiveness of an intervention. These include randomized control trials and quasi-experimental or matched comparison group designs, regression discontinuity designs, and single-case designs. You can learn about how the WWC reviews each of these designs in the Procedures and Standards Handbook. You can access this handbook through the Handbooks and Other Resources menu. Although we review all studies using the same standards, some decisions are left to WWC topic areas, such as what outcome measures should be eligible for review. Researchers designing studies in a specific topic area will want to understand these decisions. We document these decisions in review protocols that guide our reviews of studies. Each protocol describes what studies are eligible for review, how the WWC will search for them, and how they will be reviewed. In particular, they document the eligible outcome domains, how attrition will be assessed, and describe what baseline measures the WWC will examine to establish equivalence of intervention and comparison groups. The protocols are accessible from the same menu as the handbooks or on a tab on the handbook page. The Supplemental Materials tab has resources to support understanding of the WWC's procedures and standards. Read the reporting guide for study authors to understand how to document your methodology and other aspects of your study so that we can accurately assess it against our standards. Watch one of our webinars on study designs or access briefs on WWC design standards for quick references on key components of the standards for group design studies. You can learn more about the standards the WWC uses to review studies by viewing a set of 5 training modules on the group design standards. These modules provide an in-depth look into topics in the group design standards. Look for additional modules coming soon. Finally, keep coming back to the WWC's website for more resources. Before we get to your questions, I want to quickly show you how to keep up with the WWC. At the bottom of each page and on the right side of the menu on the website are a set of icons. Joining our Newsflash mailing list and following us on Twitter or Facebook are the best ways to stay informed about future practice guides and intervention report releases, webinar opportunities, and other events. For example, you'll be hearing soon about an upcoming webinar on 2 newly released intervention reports in special education topic areas that include findings from single case design research. You can also send us mail through our Contact Us page to ask us a question or share your thoughts. We look forward to hearing from you. With that, I will turn it over to Neil Sefter, Senior Economist at Mathematica Policy Research and Project Director of What Works Clearinghouse at Mathematica, who will moderate the question and answer portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Elias. As Elias said, I work on the WWC at Mathematica, and I'm happy to direct some of our questions today to our presenters. So the first question today is for Elias, and the question is, what are the criteria used to determine whether studies are eligible for review?
Great question. So this can depend by topic area and is outlined in the review protocols that I just mentioned. In particular, each topic area outlines the kinds of interventions that are eligible under that topic area. So, for example, the teacher training and evaluation and compensation protocol will list various teacher-level interventions like mentoring programs, include things like Teach for America and alternative certification programs and all of those sorts of things. There'll be a general description of the kinds of interventions that are eligible, as well as the types of populations of students or teachers who are eligible. In the case of the teacher training protocol, it would be fairly broad. And the outcome measures that are eligible under that topic area. So there are a variety of different kind of eligibility requirements that each study must meet to be reviewed under a certain topic area, and all of those are documented in our review protocols.
Great. Thanks, Elias. The next question is for Jesse, for someone who joined our webinar just a little bit late, and they want to know where they can find the study review standards.
Yeah, great. So the standards can be found from the menu header of the website by going to the Standards and Handbook tab. Then has a link to the PDF with the Procedures and Standards Handbook for the WWC. The handbook describes all of the standards that the WWC uses to review studies, including the standards for RCTs, QEDs, RDDs, and single case design standards.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. The next question is for Elias. And the question is, does the WWC examine interventions that cover topics other than those on the Blackboard, such as parent engagement or the use of technology?
So the topics on the Blackboard are the current topic areas that have review protocols. The WWC is always looking at expanding the set of topics and developing review protocols to cover topic areas that are not currently in that list. So come back soon, and hopefully we'll have what you're looking for.
Thank you. Yes, the WWC is always expanding the kinds of areas we're looking at. Also, it's worth noting that some of these studies, while they're in particular areas like math or reading, we do review programs that involve technology or some behavioral programs that might include parental engagement part. So we're working on trying to make the tagging a little more consistent so that people can find these types of studies in other ways. But as Elias said, we're always expanding the kinds of things we're looking at. So the next question is for Jesse. And The question is, to satisfy the requirements for a large sample as defined by the WWC, does a study or combination of studies need to have 50 groups or 50 treatment groups with a similar number of control groups?
Hey, thanks, Neil. And that is actually not a definition defined by the WWC. That's used for ESSA. So this is described in the Department of Education's guidance document, and you can find this guidance document by searching ESSA guidance using evidence at ed.gov.
Great, thank you. Yes, the WWC is a resource, but we're not responsible for implementing the ESSA guidelines. The department has put out some guidelines, and some of them reference the WWC, but you should be careful about which are WWC guidelines and which are by the department. The next question is for Elias, and that question is, how does the WWC decide which studies to review, and does the WWC take requests if I have one in mind?
So the WWC has a formal prioritization process to determine what interventions or studies to review. This process is outlined and described in detail in the Procedures and Standards Handbook. So for example, the rules give preference to interventions that are more likely to have high-quality research and that are based on larger studies. We also have a prioritization process for individual studies, including those that may be suggested by the public. Although most of the individual studies that the WWC reviews are those cited in grant competitions or those we review as quick reviews, which are intended to be a quick assessment of high-profile studies that receive a large amount of media attention. All that said, if you have a study you'd like the WWC to consider reviewing, you can suggest it through the help desk page. There's actually an option on the pull-down menu on the help desk page for suggest a study. So just select that option and type in the citation.
Okay, thanks, Elias. Excuse me. The next question is for Jesse and is a little bit about our procedures. And the question is, does the WWC have a protocol to keep tracks of potential conflicts of interest? And is that information presented in reports?
Okay, so for potential conflicts of interest, I'm assuming that might be studies that are funded by developers or something like that. So if that does happen, we do describe that in the intervention reports. We provide a reference list for all eligible studies reviewed by the WWC in our reports for anyone interested in a more detailed information about a study. But the WWC does not discriminate between studies conducted by independent research teams and those that were sponsored by publishers or distributors of the intervention. And also if a study was conducted by Mathematica, who helps run the WWC, that's also disclosed in the intervention report, and an outside independent WWC certified reviewer conducts that review of the study.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Elias, we have a question about the data that you mentioned that people can use. And the question is if you could provide a little more information on what kinds of things people will find in the data.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, it's really fast and easy to download. So it's not like you're downloading a gigantic data set that you have to wait for. You can actually download it really quickly and take a look at the data dictionary, which will list all the contents. So I encourage you to do that if you're interested. The data includes basically what you see on the website and maybe a little bit more. So you're essentially downloading an Excel version of the content of the website. So that's going to include the improvement index, study ratings, those sorts of things, the kind of things that show up on the website. In addition, I think you'll get the effect size. So the website usually just shows the improvement index, but you'll also get the actual effect size for the impact estimate. So there might be just a little bit more available than what's usually on the website. But you'll also see the things like the study characteristics, the sample characteristics of the studies, as I mentioned, it's nice that you can that for each study there'll be an intervention tag. And you can link those individual studies back up to the intervention report results, which are in a separate data file, and get the ratings on the interventions as well.
Thanks, Elias. Next is for Jesse, and it goes a little bit into the kinds of studies we reviewed. And the question is, are the studies reviewed by the WWC entirely or mostly based in the U.S.?
Yeah, so that is documented in each of the review protocols that the teams use to review studies. I think most of the review protocols that are that it takes place in the U.S. or a similar location or similar setting, such as Europe or other places, but the review protocols document all of that location-specific eligibility requirements.
Great, thanks. Elias, the next question is for you, and the participant asks, what is the value of a research study that doesn't meet WWC standards?
Well, I think sometimes it's helpful to know that we've reviewed a study and indicated that it doesn't meet standards. So just knowing the rating, I think, can be useful. In the data sets that you download, there's not going to be a the effect size or improvement index or any findings from studies that don't meet standards. Those are only going to be for studies that meet standards. But when you're searching on the website, you can, for individual studies, you can definitely find those that don't meet standards or were looked at but not even reviewed because they were ineligible. So I think that's helpful to know if you're trying to figure out what the status is of a specific study. But the WWC is not going to describe findings from those studies.
Okay, thanks. Jesse, someone asked how they can find information on programs that are broadly addressing a certain topic, but they don't know the specific intervention that they might be looking for.
Yeah, so Find What Works is a great way to search for interventions where you don't have a particular intervention that you're looking for. Again, on the main page of the What Works Clearinghouse, there's the blackboard with the different topic areas, and you can click one of those to enter Find What Works. And from there, you can add additional topics if you kind of want to narrow, like math for students with disabilities or English learners, to get different combinations of the topics to find a list of interventions with research reviewed by the WWC. In addition, you can go to the review of individual studies search that Elias showed, and if you have a keyword that you want to, in particular, that you're searching for, you can search by that keyword, and any citations with that keyword will show up, and you can see how the WWC has reviewed that particular study.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. Elias, what kinds of topics and interventions might fall under the behavior heading? Would that include studies of engagement or motivation or just student behavior?
Yeah, I think it would. So, I mean, one thing you can do is just go to Find What Works and click on behavior, and you can see the sorts of interventions that are included under there. There's character education interventions, coping, social skills. So it's pretty broad. I think in the kinds of behavior outcomes that could be looked at under that topic under that area. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. You should also note that in addition to intervention reports that we've been talking about, the WWC also has I think 20 practice guides now, and some of them do include behavior and go into a little more detail on practices that can deal with certain types of behavior in the classroom and outside. Jesse, someone asks how they can become a reviewer, learning about the standards and whether they can be a reviewer for the WWC.
Yeah, great. So we actually just launched new online training modules for group design standards. You can find that on the website by going to the menu, and under the handbooks and other resources, there's a link to the group design standards online training modules. And this is a free training for anyone interested in the group design standards. It's a series of I think about 5 different modules, and once you've completed all modules, there's a certificate of completion you can print. We're going to be offering some additional modules later this year that go into the WWC's procedures for reviewing studies and reporting findings. In addition, when those additional modules are launched, there will be a certification exam offered. And so in order to become a certified reviewer for the WWC, candidates have to pass that certification exam and successfully complete a graded study review. So stay tuned for more information a little later this year when those additional modules are released and when the certification exam is offered online.
Great. Yeah, that's one of the exciting developments by the WWC is trying to get these standards out so more people are aware of them and understand them. So this online training effort has been a big one, and we're excited to get the rest of the information out there. Elias, unlike the person who knew what topic they were interested in but weren't sure of the intervention, we have someone who's looking for studies about a specific intervention and wonders where they should look.
Yeah, good question. So I think the place to start is again find what works, and you go to the topic where you'd expect to find it. So if you're interested in success for all, you might try to enter through literacy. Teach for America, you might try to enter through teacher excellence, and you can just look to see if it shows up in the list. If that doesn't work, if you don't see it there, it might be that we haven't reviewed it. But you can also go to the search for go through the search for individual studies and type it in there and see if you can find individual studies that have used that intervention. We're always adding individual studies to our database, so if you don't find something on one day, you might check again later. Because we do continually update that database. Even when we don't release an intervention report, we're often putting in studies that we've reviewed for individually for other reasons, not part of systematic reviews. So you can find those through the search if we haven't actually done an intervention report on that intervention. Because we like to get as many intervention reports out as we can, but we haven't done every intervention we'd like to do at this point. So the individual studies are another place to go.
Great, thanks. Jesse, a little practical question. Someone asks whether there will be a link available for this webinar after we finish.
Yes, there will. So we'll be posting on the WWC website a recording of this webinar as well as a transcript. And that will be posted under Find What Works. When you click one of the topics to go into Find What Works, on the left-hand column below the Blackboard, there's some icons under You Might Also Be Interested In. That includes some links to resources like practice guides and special features and also webinars. So we'll be posting that there, as well as I imagine probably under the related resources for the supplemental materials for the handbook and other resources page. So we will be posting a link to this webinar recording as well as a transcript.
Great, thanks. We're accumulating all sorts of different types of media on the WWC. We've had webinars, and we've recently put out some videos in addition to our various reports. So we encourage you to keep coming back and looking for new types of things that you can view to learn about the WWC. Elias, someone noticed that the online training looks like it covers group designs like randomized trials and quasi-experimental designs, but they're curious about the other designs that the WWC has standards for. Are there trainings for those?
Great question. So you're correct that currently the online training is focused on group designs, which include the randomized controlled trials and quasi-experimental designs. And as Jesse mentioned, we're still adding some modules to that training series. So that's where we're currently focused, although we certainly envision expanding to single case designs and regression discontinuity designs down the road. For the moment, the key resources for understanding those standards for regression discontinuity designs and single case designs are the handbook itself, which describes those standards. You'll find them in appendices in the handbook. And in addition, for single case designs, we've just recently released some supporting materials to explain the standards. So we've just recently released our first intervention report that includes single case designs findings as part of the intervention rating. So when we release that, we also release some new supporting documents to really help you understand the single case design standards and how they're used to rate interventions. So those new resources are available on the pages we showed you on the handbook tabs. So there's one actually, Julia, if you could go back to the handbook tab. You can see one of them there, and then there's another one on the additional resources. Pull that up for you so you can see them. Yeah, so there's key criteria used in WWC reviews of single case design research, and if you go to supplemental materials, there's another single case design focused supporting document. Which is, there it is, Understanding WWC Intervention Reports that summarize single case design research.
Okay, great, thank you. Jesse, someone has a question about some of the information we provide about the different studies and the findings, and they want to know where they could find a description that defines the different outcome domains that are listed under reviewed research.
Yeah, and those can be found in each of the review protocols. As you see up on the screen, that's, again, you can find that under the Handbooks and Other Resources tab and go to Review Protocols. So each review protocol lists the domains that are eligible for review under that protocol, as well as the definition of what that domain is and what measures that are included in that domain, what those are. So that's where you'd go to find all the information about the outcome domains included in a review.
Okay, Jesse, thank you. Elias, somebody was looking through our standards and noticed that there are some drafts for cluster designs and for regression discontinuity designs. Are these standards that are official and used by the WWC, or are they still in draft?
Those are still in draft. So you can see on the demo right now, there's a proposed standards section. And in that section, there are proposed standards for regression discontinuity designs and for cluster designs. Those are draft, so they are not currently used to review studies. The standards used to review studies currently are in the handbook version 3.0. We are working on an update to the handbook, and somewhat revised versions of these proposed standards are expected to be included in that new handbook, and once they are, then they will be the official standards and we'll use for reviews. But we don't change standards in the middle of a handbook version. So the active standards are those in the handbook.
Okay, great. Jesse, someone has a question about how they would find out about new reviews done by the WWC. Is there some place that they can get information about them or look for those?
Yeah, so at the bottom of each page, as you can see here on the screen, there's some icons, and the first one on the left is a lightning bolt, and if you click on that, you can sign up for the news flash. So you get email blasts about any new reports released by the WhatWorks Clearinghouse. In addition, on the main page of the website, there's a highlights rotator, and any newly released reports or info like webinars and other new information from the Clearinghouse will be displayed in that rotating webinar, rotating rotator. And in addition, when you go to the publications search, any newly released publications, the latest intervention reports and practice guides will be listed at the top of the list. So that's another way that you can find the latest releases as well.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. That is the last question we've received. So I want to thank Elias and Jesse for bravely answering all those questions. We encourage you to send questions after the webinar. Whenever you like, you can send questions to us at the WWC through the Contact Us page, and we answer every question that's sent to us. So we encourage you, if you have questions about the standards or our reports or any of our processes, please let us know. And at this point, I'll turn the webinar over to our producer, Bryce.
Thanks, Neil. This concludes the webcast for today. Please submit feedback to our presentation team in your browser window when the event ends. If you are unable to provide your feedback at this time, you can view the on-demand recording of this event and access the survey widget there. The on-demand will be available approximately 1 day after today's webcast has ended, and you can access it using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. You can also submit feedback to the team through the Contact Us form on our website, whatworks.ed.gov. Thank you and have a great day.